The first time she saw him, the wind stopped breathing. Ceres Holloway had always believed fear was a choice. Holloway Manor had tried to teach her otherwise. Its iron gates groaned at dusk, its corridors whispered at midnight, and the forest that pressed too close to its crumbling walls seemed to listen when she spoke aloud. But she had survived 23 years beneath its shadow by refusing to believe in anything she could not hold in her hands. Debt notices were real. Cracked foundations were real. The auction documents waiting inside the study were painfully real. Legends were not. So when the black car disappeared down the winding gravel road and the stranger stepped out alone, she told herself the chill that followed him was nothing more than winter settling early across the moors. He moved like someone accustomed to command. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair wind-tossed and falling over a hard, sculpted brow. A coat lined in black fur framed him like a mantle of shadow. His jaw was marked by faint bruises or old battles, she couldn't tell which, and his eyes. His eyes were not the color of any sky she had ever known. They were storm-dark and etched in something feral, something that seemed to catch what little light the gray afternoon offered and hold it captive. Behind him, at the crest of the hill, a wolf stood silhouetted in the mist. Ceres refused to look at it for long. "You're late," she called, her voice sharper than she felt. His gaze settled on her fully then. It was not admiration she saw there. It was recognition. "I am precisely on time," he replied, his voice low, controlled, a tone that carried without effort. The iron gates between them trembled. Ceres stepped forward before she could reconsider. Auburn curls whipped around her pale face, and the thin silk of her dress clung to her as the air grew unnaturally still. She would not let this man, no matter how imposing, see her falter. "You've seen the property," she said briskly. "The estate, the land rights, the forest boundary. Once the contract is signed, everything transfers. There will be no negotiations afterward." A faint curve touched his mouth, though it held no warmth. "I require no negotiations." He reached for the gates. The moment his gloved hand brushed the iron bars, the world shifted. A pulse, low and ancient, rippled through the metal. The sigils etched into the archway, worn nearly invisible by time, flared faintly beneath his touch. The sound that followed was not quite thunder, not quite breath. The gates opened inward. On their own. Ceres's heartbeat stumbled. She told herself it was faulty hinges, old mechanisms finally giving way. Behind him, the wolf lowered its massive head. Not in threat. In submission. She swallowed and forced herself to turn away first. Inside the manor's grand foyer, dust motes drifted like suspended ash in the dim light. She placed the contract on the long oak table her ancestors had once used for banquets and funerals alike. "Sign," she said, steadying her voice. "And Holloway Manor is yours." He removed his glove. His hand was scarred, powerful, a warrior's hand. When he took the pen, the air thickened again. "You understand," he murmured, eyes lifting to meet hers, "that this land is bound." "To me," she cut in. "And I am unbinding it." Something ancient flickered behind his gaze. Not anger. Anticipation. He signed. The instant ink met parchment, a violent tremor shook the foundation. The chandeliers rattled overhead. Outside, a howl split the sky, joined by another and another until the forest roared with it. Ceres staggered, gripping the table as cold fire lanced through her veins. Beneath the floorboards, beneath the stone, beneath her very skin, something awakened. The man across from her did not look surprised. "You have not unbound it," he said quietly. His eyes burned now, unmistakably gold. "You have fulfilled it." And in the distance, every wolf in Blackmoor Forest knelt. Chapter 1. The wind had teeth in Blackmoor. It scraped along the broken turrets of Holloway Manor and hissed through the iron lattice of the gates as if the land itself were trying to whisper something no one wanted to hear. Ceres Holloway stood at the tallest window in the west wing and watched the fog drag itself over the moors in slow, coiling ribbons. Beyond the mist, the forest pressed close, dark, patient, listening. She had grown up with the sense of being watched. As a child, she had imagined it was ghosts. As a teenager, creditors. Now at 23 she knew better. It was expectation. Holloway Manor did not simply house its last descendant. It waited on her. The estate had once been magnificent. The portraits lining the grand staircase still insisted upon it, oil-painted women in lace collars and silver crowns of woven branches, Men in dark formal coats with wolves seated at their boots like loyal hounds. The eyes in the paintings followed her as she passed, not with judgment but with something worse. Disappointment. She paused before the largest portrait at the landing. A woman with cascading auburn hair nearly identical to her own. The resemblance had always unsettled her. The painted ancestor stood in a courtyard beneath a full moon, one hand lifted, palm outward, while shadows of wolves circled her feet. The plaque beneath the frame had long since tarnished, but the name remained legible. Aurelia Holloway. The first. Ceres exhaled sharply and turned away. Superstition, she muttered under her breath. Romantic nonsense. Romantic nonsense did not account for the stack of final notices waiting on her desk in the study. She crossed the corridor, boots echoing in the cavernous silence. The manor was too large for one person. It amplified solitude, stretched it thin until it echoed back as something almost physical. Most of the servants had left years ago, after her father's death and the subsequent decline of the estate's finances. A few loyal staff had lingered as long as they could, but loyalty did not pay wages. Now only Mrs. Alden remained, stubborn, gray-haired and fiercely protective in ways Ceres pretended not to notice. The study smelled of old paper and dying embers. Ceres lowered herself into the high-backed leather chair behind the desk that had once belonged to her father. The surface was scarred with ink stains and faint knife marks from generations past. She ran her fingers over them absently before reaching for the top envelope. Final notice. The letter seemed to glare up at her. She slid it open with a practiced motion. The contents were as expected. Legal phrasing, calculated indifference, a deadline circled in red. 30 days. 30 days before the estate would be seized and auctioned to the highest bidder. She leaned back, pressing her fingers against her temples. The manor required more repairs than she could afford. The land produced little revenue now. Tourists had stopped coming when rumors began spreading. Rumors of wolves growing bolder, of livestock found half devoured at the forest's edge, of strange lights moving between the trees at night. Blackmore had always been isolated, but recently isolation had curdled into something darker. A knock sounded softly at the study door. "Enter," Ceres called. Mrs. Alden stepped inside carrying a silver tray with a single cup of tea. Her lined face was set in its usual stern expression, though worry flickered in her eyes when she saw the papers strewn across the desk. "You've not eaten," the older woman observed. "I'm not hungry." "That is not the same thing." Ceres forced a small smile. "I'll manage." Mrs. Alden set the tray down and glanced toward the window, where the forest loomed in layered shadows. "They've been seen again." Ceres stiffened slightly. "Who?" "You know who." She did. Everyone did. "The hunters claimed 3 wolves crossed the river last night," Mrs. Alden continued. "Too large to be strays. One stood nearly shoulder-high to a man." "Exaggeration thrives in boredom," Ceres replied evenly. The older woman hesitated. "And what of the howling?" Ceres's jaw tightened. The howling had grown more frequent these past weeks. It rolled through the night like a chorus. Not chaotic but organized, rising and falling in patterns that felt disturbingly deliberate. "They're animals," she said. "Animals howl." Mrs. Alden studied her for a long moment as though weighing whether to argue. "Your father used to say the forest listens." "My father believed too many things." The silence that followed carried the weight of grief long settled but never fully dissolved. After Mrs. Alden departed, Ceres remained seated, staring at the red-circled deadline until the numbers blurred. She had resisted the idea of selling for as long as pride allowed. Holloway Manor was legacy. It was history. It was a burden she had resented but never truly considered relinquishing. Till now. The idea of freedom had begun as a whisper, faint, treacherous, intoxicating. Sell the estate. Clear the debts. Leave Blackmore. Begin again somewhere the air did not taste of expectation. She rose abruptly, pacing toward the window. The forest was barely visible through the thickening fog. Yet even from this distance she felt it, a hum beneath the earth like a pulse. Watching. "I will not belong to you," she murmured toward the trees. The wind rose in response, rattling the panes. That evening she ventured into the village. Blackmore proper consisted of a scattering of stone cottages clustered around a weathered church and a pub that leaned slightly to one side as though exhausted. Lanterns flickered against the encroaching dusk, casting long shadows across the narrow street. Conversations dimmed when she entered the tavern. Ceres ignored it. She was accustomed to being observed, whispered about. The last Holloway. The girl who lived alone in the manor at the forest's edge. The one whose family had always kept to themselves. She approached the counter. Ale. The innkeeper nodded stiffly. His gaze flicked briefly toward the door as if expecting something to follow her inside. At a nearby table, two farmers spoke in hushed tones. "I'm telling you it wasn't natural," one insisted. "The tracks were wrong. Too deep. Perhaps you should not leave your livestock so close to the trees," Ceres interjected coolly as she accepted her drink. The men shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, miss," the second replied, "the trees are closer than they used to be." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. She lifted an eyebrow. "Trees do not move." "No," the first farmer said, lowering his voice further. "But something in them does." She met his gaze steadily. "Fear is contagious. I suggest you resist spreading it." The tavern door creaked open behind her. A sudden draft swept through the room, extinguishing one of the lanterns. Ceres felt the change instantly, a tension snapping taut beneath the surface of ordinary sound. Silence fell. She turned slowly. A man stood framed in the doorway, backlit by fading twilight. His coat was dark, heavy, lined with fur. Snow dusted his broad shoulders, though none had yet fallen in the village. His hair, windswept and black as a raven's wing, fell carelessly over a sharply defined brow. There was nothing ostentatious in his stance, and yet every instinct in the room recoiled. Not from danger. From dominance. His gaze moved across the tavern, assessing unhurried before settling on her. The air seemed to compress. Ceres did not look away. For a heartbeat, neither did he. Then he stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots. Conversations did not resume. Even the innkeeper seemed to forget his next movement. The stranger approached the counter with deliberate ease and placed a gloved hand upon its worn surface. "I require a room," he said. His voice was low, controlled. The kind of voice that did not need volume to command attention. The innkeeper swallowed. "Of course." Ceres studied him from the corner of her eye. There were faint marks along his jaw, bruises or old scars, difficult to discern in the dim light. His presence felt less like that of a traveler and more like a force temporarily contained in human shape. "You are far from any main road," she observed. His gaze returned to her, steady and unsettling. "I seldom travel main roads." A flicker of something, curiosity perhaps, stirred beneath her irritation. "And what brings you to Blackmoor?" "The forest," he replied simply. A ripple passed through the tavern. Ceres felt her fingers tighten around her glass. "The forest is not for sale." "Everything is for sale," he said calmly. "Not everything." One corner of his mouth curved faintly, though no humor reached his eyes. "We shall see." The innkeeper cleared his throat and gestured awkwardly toward the staircase. The stranger inclined his head once and ascended without another word. The door shut behind him. Sound gradually returned to the room, though subdued. Ceres finished her drink in silence and left shortly after. The walk back to the manor felt longer than usual. The fog had thickened, swallowing the road in pale gray. She became aware of her own breathing, of the crunch of gravel beneath her boots. Halfway up the hill, a howl split the night. It rose from deep within the forest, long, resonant, layered with others that joined in eerie harmony. The sound vibrated through her bones. She stopped walking. Another howl answered from the opposite side of the valley. Encircled. Her pulse quickened despite herself. Then from the ridge to her left she saw it. A silhouette against the fog. A wolf. Larger than any she had ever seen, broad-shouldered, powerful, its fur dark enough to blend with shadow. Its eyes caught what little light existed and reflected it back, pale, luminous. It did not move toward her. It did not retreat. It watched. Ceres forced herself to meet its gaze. "You are not myth," she whispered. "You are flesh." The wolf lowered its head slightly. Not in threat. Not in fear. In acknowledgement. Her breath caught. From the manor behind her, the iron gates shuddered faintly as if stirred by an unseen hand. The wolf turned first, vanishing into the fog without sound. The howling subsided, one voice at a time, until only wind remained. Sarah stood alone on the hill. For the first time in her life, doubt crept beneath her certainty like cold beneath a door. Perhaps the forest did listen. And perhaps it was waiting for something. Or someone. Inside Holloway Manor, the portrait seemed darker than before. She ascended the staircase slowly, pausing again before Aurelia's painted likeness. In the flicker of candlelight, the wolves at the ancestors' feet appeared closer. Sarah lifted her chin. "I will not be the last," she murmured to the silent hall. But whether she meant the last Holloway to live there, or the last to resist, she could not yet tell. Outside, beyond the iron gates, something moved through the trees with deliberate patience. And Blackmore held its breath. Chapter 2. Morning came to Holloway Manor like a reluctant guest. The fog did not lift with the sun. It clung to the moors in pale sheets, draping itself across the iron gates and winding through the skeletal trees as though the night had forgotten to leave. Sarah stood at the tall window of the east corridor, fingers curled around the cool stone frame, and watched the horizon for movement she refused to name as anticipation. She had not slept. The howls had returned just before dawn, closer this time, layered and deliberate. Not the wild cry of scattered animals, but something coordinated. A chorus. Summons. She told herself she was being foolish. Wolves had always roamed Blackmore Forest. The Holloways had simply been close enough to hear them. And yet, the image of the massive silhouette on the ridge lingered in her thoughts. The way it had lowered its head, not in fear, not in threat. In acknowledgement. Her jaw tightened. She would not romanticize coincidence. A knock sounded below. Firm. Measured. Her pulse faltered. Visitors rarely came to the manor unannounced, and never this early. She descended the grand staircase slowly, boots echoing against marble that had long since dulled. The portraits lining the walls seemed to lean inward as she passed, candlelight glinting across varnished eyes. Another knock. 3 strikes this time. Mrs. Alden appeared at the base of the stairs, pale beneath her composure. "There is a gentleman at the gates," she said carefully. Sarah stilled on the last step. "Alone." Pause. "Yes. That was worse. I will see him." The air outside cut sharp against her skin as she stepped onto the front terrace. The manor loomed behind her, its spires and broken gargoyles stark against the muted sky. Gravel crunched beneath her boots as she crossed the courtyard toward the iron gates. He stood beyond them, framed by mist. Even at a distance, his presence altered the space around him. The fog thinned in subtle currents, bending away from his form. His dark coat fell heavy around broad shoulders, fur lining brushing against the high collar of a fitted black shirt beneath. His hair, unruly and ink-dark, shifted slightly in the wind, revealing a face cut from angles and restraint. Lucien Darkmoor. Though he had not yet given his name, she knew it with the instinctive certainty one recognizes a storm before thunder sounds. He did not bow. He did not speak. He simply watched her approach. The gates stood between them, wrought iron twisted into intricate patterns of thorns and crescents. At their arch, faint carvings lay half hidden by rust and time. She stopped a few paces away. "You found your way back," she said coolly. "I do not lose my way." His voice was the same as in the tavern. Low, controlled, threaded with something that pressed against the senses rather than merely reaching the ear. "What do you want?" she asked. His gaze flicked briefly to the manor behind her, then returned to her face. "The estate." The word landed with deliberate weight. Sarah folded her arms. "It is not listed publicly." "Not yet." A faint chill brushed the back of her neck. "I have received inquiries," she said evenly. "None have satisfied the valuation." "I will." Confidence radiated from him, not loud or boastful but absolute. It did not feel like persuasion. It felt like inevitability. The wind shifted. From somewhere beyond the hill, a low sound carried, too deep to be mistaken for mere breeze through branches. A growl. Lucien did not turn. Sarah felt it in her spine. "You come with an entourage?" she asked, lifting her chin. "They remain where they are needed." "Which is?" "Watching." The word was spoken without threat, yet the ground beneath her boots seemed to hum faintly. She refused to glance toward the tree-line. "You presume much," she said. "I presume nothing. I know what this land is." And what is that? His eyes sharpened, not in hostility but in recognition of a line crossed. Ancient. A silence settled between them, dense and charged. Sarah stepped closer to the gate. Close enough now to see the faint scars along his knuckles where the glove did not quite conceal them. Close enough to note that his eyes were not a single color but a dark storm rimmed with flecks of molten gold. This estate is failing, she said briskly, forcing the conversation into practical territory. The foundations require reinforcement. The western wing roof must be replaced. The land has not yielded profitable harvest in years. If you are seeking investment opportunity, you will find better elsewhere. I am not seeking profit. Then what are you seeking? He held her gaze without blinking. Claim. The word should have angered her. Instead, something beneath her skin responded, a faint flicker like a match struck in darkness. She stepped back. There is no claim here, she said sharply. This property belongs to me. To my name. And your name, he replied, is precisely why I am here. The fog thickened briefly, then thinned again, curling around the bars of the gate as though drawn toward his voice. She refused to acknowledge it. You are aware of the debt attached to the estate, she said. Any purchase would require immediate settlement. It will be settled. And the forest boundary? Included. Her throat tightened. The forest had never been part of her calculations. It was simply there, vast and encroaching, untamable. You are interested in trees? She asked, allowing a note of dry disbelief. I am interested in what stands beneath them. The growl sounded again, closer. This time she did glance toward the ridge. 3 shapes stood there now. Both massive, still, their fur dark against the pale horizon. They did not move forward. They did not snarl. They waited. Her pulse thudded once, hard. When she looked back at him, his gaze had not left her face. You should control your animals, she said tightly. They are not animals. A silence followed that statement, not dramatic, not explosive. Simply true. The iron between them creaked softly. Neither of them had touched it. Saris felt something beneath her feet, a tremor subtle as a heartbeat. You are mistaken if you believe intimidation will influence me, she said. His mouth curved slightly, though no humor warmed it. If I intended intimidation, you would not mistake it. A flicker of irritation sparked within her. You overestimate yourself. Do I? He stepped forward. Not enough to touch the gate, merely enough that his presence pressed closer. The fog recoiled further. You are the last Holloway, he said quietly. The words struck like a physical force. My family is none of your concern. It is entirely my concern. Her composure thinned. You presume a familiarity you have not earned. I do not require permission to acknowledge fact. And what fact is that? That your blood has been waiting. The tremor beneath the earth intensified briefly, then stilled. Saris's heartbeat pounded in her ears. This conversation is over, she said. If you wish to make a formal offer, you will do so in writing. Through a solicitor. As any civilized buyer would. I am not civilized. The statement was not boastful. It was an admission. Her breath caught. Then you are not a buyer. He regarded her for a long moment. On the contrary. He removed his glove. The motion was unhurried, deliberate. The leather slid free, revealing a hand marked by old battles, faint scars crossing powerful fingers, veins etched beneath pale skin. He lifted that hand and placed it against the iron gate. The world shifted. The contact was gentle. Barely pressure. And yet the carvings along the archway flared faintly, like embers catching breath. A pulse radiated outward. The iron groaned. The wolves on the ridge lowered their heads simultaneously. Saris's vision sharpened, colors intensifying for a heartbeat before snapping back. The air thickened, heavy with something metallic and electric. The gate began to open. On its own. She stepped back instinctively. The hinges screamed, not from rust but from something older being forced awake. When the gates swung inward fully, they did not slam or creak to a stop. They bowed. Lucien lowered his hand. The glow along the carvings dimmed but did not vanish entirely. A faint warmth lingered in the metal like heat after lightning strikes. You see, he said softly. The land recognizes me. Saris forced air into her lungs. Tricks, she whispered, though she did not believe it. I do not perform tricks. He stepped through the threshold. The moment his boot crossed onto Holloway soil, the tremor surged again, stronger this time, rippling outward from the contact point like a stone dropped into water. Behind him, the wolves descended the ridge in silence. They did not approach the gate. They remained at its boundary. Waiting. Lucian halted a few paces from her. Up close, the subtle dominance she had felt before intensified. It was not aggression. It was gravity. She understood then why the tavern had fallen silent. Why the air bent around him. He did not command attention. He possessed it. You may conduct this negotiation inside, she said stiffly. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledgement not submission. They walked side by side toward the manor doors. The wolves did not follow. Inside, the foyer seemed smaller. The chandeliers flickered faintly as though responding to an unseen current. Lucian's gaze traveled across the marble floors, the sweeping staircase, the portraits lining the walls. He paused before Aurelia Holloway's likeness. Recognition flickered across his features. You know her? Ceres demanded. I know what she was. And what was that? Queen. The word echoed against stone. Ceres's jaw tightened. My ancestors were landowners. Nothing more. Landowners do not wear crowns of wolf bone. Her eyes darted to the portrait. The painted crown did resemble woven antler and silver, shaped not as ornament but as symbol. It is artistic exaggeration, she said sharply. Is it? She moved past him toward the study. The contract lay prepared on the desk, documents she had drafted late into the night after reviewing the final notices again. If this man intended to play games of mysticism, she would anchor the exchange in ink and law. He entered without hesitation. I will not tolerate ambiguity, she said, retrieving the papers. The estate, the grounds, the forest boundary. Upon signature, all ownership transfers. Yes. There will be no subsequent claim upon my person or name. A faint stillness settled in the room. No, he agreed. The response came too easily. She placed the contract on the desk between them. The sum is listed here, she said. Payment due immediately upon signing. It will be transferred. He did not ask the amount. He did not negotiate. The confidence unsettled her more than refusal would have. She handed him the pen. For a brief moment their fingers brushed. A jolt, sharp and unmistakable, shot up her arm. Her breath hitched. His eyes darkened, gold flickering beneath the surface. He did not withdraw first. The air in the study thickened. The faint carvings etched into the desk's wooden edge, details she had never truly noticed, shimmered faintly. Her pulse raced. Sign, she said more sharply than intended. He broke contact and took the pen. As the nib touched parchment, a low vibration hummed through the floorboards. Ink flowed. The moment his signature completed its final stroke, the vibration erupted into a violent tremor. The chandeliers rattled overhead. A crack split somewhere deep within the manor's walls. Outside, a howl tore through the air, joined instantly by others, rising in layered chorus that shook the glass in its panes. Ceres staggered, gripping the desk. Cold fire surged through her veins, not pain, not heat, but something alive, racing beneath her skin like awakened lightning. The portraits along the staircase flickered. The carvings on the gate outside blazed brighter. Lucian did not flinch. He watched her. You have not sold it, he said quietly over the rising howls. The tremor intensified, rolling through the foundation as though the earth itself were shifting to accommodate something long dormant. You have fulfilled it. Her vision blurred briefly, then sharpened with unnatural clarity. She could hear the wolves distinctly now, not as distant sound but as layered voices carrying intent. Claim. The word echoed, not spoken aloud but felt. She forced herself upright. What have you done? She demanded. His gaze burned openly gold now. What was always meant to be done. Outside, beyond the gates, every wolf in Blackmoor Forest knelt. And the manor, ancient, watchful, waiting, breathed for the first time in centuries. Chapter 3. The manor did not settle after the tremor. It breathed. Ceres felt it beneath her palms where they pressed against the scarred oak desk, felt it in the marrow of her bones as the final echoes of the quake rolled outward across Blackmoor. The chandeliers continued to sway long after the floor stilled, crystal prisms chiming softly like distant bells. Outside, the howls did not fade. They multiplied. Layer upon layer of sound rose from the forest, weaving together into something far too synchronized to be wild. It was not chaos. It was chorus. It was answer. Lucien stood across from her, unmoved by the tremor, unmoved by the sound. His signature dried black against parchment between them, ink sealing more than ownership. "You said the estate would transfer," Sarah said, her voice unsteady despite her effort. "You did not say it would." "Awaken," he finished quietly. The words slid through the room like a blade. The air still vibrated faintly. She could feel it brushing against her skin, threading through her veins. Cold and heat coiled together beneath her ribs, neither painful nor pleasant, simply alive. The wolves' voices rose again, closer this time. She tore her gaze from him and strode toward the tall study windows. The heavy curtains stirred though no wind touched them. When she flung them aside, her breath caught in her throat. They were everywhere. Dark shapes emerging from the fog at the forest's edge. Massive forms descending the ridge in fluid silence. They did not charge. They did not snarl. They gathered. The iron gates stood open. Beyond them, at least 24 wolves formed a wide arc around the manor grounds. Larger than any natural breed, their shoulders broad, their fur thick and shadowed in charcoal and midnight hues. Their eyes reflected pale silver in the gray light. They did not cross the boundary. They waited. For what she did not dare name. Behind her, Lucien moved at last. His boots made no sound on the marble floor. "They will not enter without invitation," he said. Her hands curled into fists. "You command them. I lead them. That is not an answer. It is the only one you require." The hum beneath her skin intensified, pulsing in time with the wolves' gathered presence. She pressed a hand to her sternum as if she could physically contain it. "This ends now," she said. "Whatever you intended, whatever illusion you've orchestrated." "I have orchestrated nothing." She turned sharply. "You touch my gates and ancient carvings ignite. You sign a document and the ground splits. You step onto my land and wolves descend from the forest as though summoned. And you expect me to believe this is coincidence?" His gaze did not waver. "I expected you to feel it." The words struck deeper than accusation. He felt it. That was the problem. Something had shifted inside her the moment his ink met the page. A thread drawn taut between them, invisible but undeniable. When he moved, she sensed it. When he breathed, she was aware of the rhythm. And beneath that thread, deeper still, the land pulsed. A knock reverberated from the front doors, frantic, urgent. Mrs. Alden's voice followed. "Miss Holloway." Saris tore herself from the study and descended the hall. Lucien did not stop her. When she opened the doors, Mrs. Alden stood pale against the threshold. "They're on the grounds," the older woman whispered. "They came from nowhere. Dozens of them." "I see them," Sarah said tightly. "Should we call the constable?" "There is nothing he could do." Mrs. Alden glanced past her, catching sight of Lucien standing in the foyer shadows. Her expression tightened further. "Is this because of him?" Saris hesitated. The hum beneath her ribs flared again, sharper this time, almost electric. A strange awareness tugged at her senses, pulling her attention outward beyond sight and sound. She could feel movement in the fog. Feel the wolves shifting positions. Not through her eyes. Through something else. "I don't know," she admitted. Outside, one wolf stepped forward. Massive. Dark-furred. A scar cutting across its muzzle. It halted just beyond the open gate and lowered its head. Not in aggression. In submission. The others followed. A ripple of synchronized motion swept through the gathered pack, heads dipping in unison, bodies lowering slightly as if bowing before an unseen force. Mrs. Alden gasped. Saris's heart thundered. "They're not looking at him," Mrs. Alden whispered. "They were looking at her." The realization struck like cold water. Every luminous gaze fixed not on Lucien behind her, but on her standing framed in the doorway of Holloway Manor. The hum inside her surged violently. Her knees nearly buckled. Lucien's presence solidified at her back, not touching, not restraining, simply there. "They recognize the bond," he said quietly. "I did not agree to any bond. You agreed when you signed." "I signed property documents." "You signed legacy." The word reverberated through her chest like an echo. The lead wolf took another step forward. Instinct screamed at her to retreat. Instead she descended the stone steps. Mrs. Alden called her name, but it sounded distant, muffled beneath the rushing pulse in her ears. She stopped just short of the gate. The wolves did not move closer. They waited. The scarred wolf raised its head slowly, meeting her gaze. Something inside her responded. Not fear. Recognition. A flicker of images flashed across her mind, too fast to grasp fully. Moonlit courtyards. Women crowned in woven bone and silver. Wolves circling but never threatening. A hand raised in command. Her breath hitched. The scarred wolf lowered itself further, forelegs bending. Submission. The entire pack mirrored the motion. Saris felt the shift like a door opening within her. A word rose unbidden to her lips. Rise. She had not intended to speak it aloud. Yet the sound carried across the courtyard, steady and clear. The wolves obeyed. Every one of them. They rose as one. The hum beneath her skin settled into a steady rhythm, no longer chaotic but aligned. Behind her, Lycan exhaled slowly. You see, he murmured. It was never about ownership. Her throat felt raw. What is it about? He stepped down beside her at last. Recognition. The word did not soothe. It ignited. A sudden wave of sensation flooded her, sharper now, more invasive. Her senses stretched outward beyond her body. She could hear individual heartbeats among the wolves. Smell damp earth and pine sap and iron-rich soil beneath stone. Feel the subtle shift of paws against gravel. The world sharpened painfully. He staggered. Lycan's hand caught her elbow, firm, steady. The contact sent a jolt through her, brighter than before. Not cold this time. Warm. Alive. She tore her arm free. Do not touch me. His jaw tightened, but he withdrew. You are awakening, he said. To what? To what you are. I am human. His gaze flickered faintly with something almost sympathetic. You are Holloway. The name carried weight she had never understood. The wolves began to circle slowly, forming a wider perimeter around the estate grounds. Not closing in. Guarding. From what? Or for whom? A sharp cry pierced the air from the forest's deeper edge. One wolf broke formation and sprinted toward the sound. The rest stiffened. Saris felt it instantly, a jarring spike of alarm that did not originate from her own thoughts. It struck her chest like a thrown stone. Danger. The word pulsed in her mind. She turned toward the treeline. Movement flickered within the mist. Not wolf. Something else. Lycan stepped forward, eyes blazing gold. Stay behind me. The command snapped through the air. Something inside her recoiled at it. I am not yours to command. His head tilted slightly, acknowledgement of challenge. Then stand beside me. Another cry erupted, closer now. The wolf that had run ahead howled sharply, a sound edged with warning rather than greeting. The pack's posture shifted instantly from submission to readiness. Teeth bared. Muscles coiled. Saris's pulse synchronized with theirs. She could feel the tension building like a storm front. Shapes emerged from the trees. Leaner wolves, fur lighter, eyes colder. Their movement lacked the quiet unity of Lycan's pack. They spread outward, testing the boundary. Rival. The word pressed into her consciousness. Lycan's voice dropped lower, darker. They have scented the change. What change? She demanded. You. The rival wolves halted at the treeline, assessing. One stepped forward, larger than the others, its fur streaked with ash gray and bone white. Its gaze locked onto Saris. Not submission. Challenge. The sensation hit her like a physical blow. Sharp, invasive, demanding. Flame. No. The denial surged from her core before she consciously formed it. The hum inside her flared bright. The ground beneath her feet warmed. The rival wolf flinched. Lycan glanced sideways at her, surprise flickering briefly across his controlled expression. Do it again, he murmured. I don't know what I did. You pushed back. The rival wolf snarled, a low, rumbling threat that rippled through its pack. Lycan stepped forward, shoulders squaring. The wolves behind them fanned out. Saris felt the pull again, the thread linking her to Lycan, to the land, to the gathered pack. She inhaled sharply. The rival wolf took one deliberate step onto the estate boundary. The iron gate vibrated. A spark flickered along the carvings overhead. Ceres's hand lifted instinctively. The sensation surged, not chaotic this time but focused. Directed. Leave, she heard herself say. The word carried further than sound should allow. The rival wolf halted mid-step. Its ears flattened. For a heartbeat, silence held. Then the wolf recoiled violently as though struck by unseen force. It retreated backward into the treeline, snarling in fury but not advancing. The rest of its pack followed, melting into fog and shadow. The pressure in her chest eased abruptly. The wolves around the manor relaxed, not entirely but enough. Lucien turned to her slowly. You commanded them, he said. I defended my home. It is no longer only yours. The reminder stung. She faced him squarely. What have you bound me to? His gaze softened, not in weakness but in gravity. Truth. The word infuriated her more than threat would have. The hum inside her had settled now into a steady current, present but no longer overwhelming. The wolves resumed their positions around the perimeter, vigilant and watchful. Mrs. Alden remained frozen in the doorway, hands clasped tightly before her. Ceres climbed the steps back toward the manor. Each movement felt different now, as if the ground responded subtly to her weight. At the threshold she paused. The iron gate stood open still. The carvings along its arch glowed faintly, not blazing as before but alive. Lucien remained below, eyes lifted to her. You cannot deny what has begun, he said. I can refuse it. Refusal will not undo awakening. She stepped inside. The doors closed behind her with a resonant finality. The manor felt changed. Not haunted. Alert. As if it had straightened from long slumber. She pressed her palm against the cool stone wall of the foyer. A pulse answered her touch. Soft. Familiar. The portraits along the staircase seemed brighter somehow, colors deepened by unseen light. Aurelia's painted gaze no longer felt distant. Felt knowing. Ceres withdrew her hand sharply. This is madness, she whispered. Yet beneath the fear, beneath the fury, beneath the denial, there was power. And it was listening. Outside the wolves kept watch. Inside, Holloway Manor awakened fully for the first time in generations. And within Ceres Holloway, something ancient had opened its eyes. Chapter 4. Night fell heavier than it had any right to. Holloway Manor did not dim with the sun. It seemed to sharpen. Shadows lengthened along the corridors, not as absence of light but as presence of something deeper. The wolves remained stationed beyond the iron gates, dark sentinels woven into the fog, their silhouettes shifting only to adjust position. They had not left. They would not leave. Ceres stood in the grand foyer long after the doors had closed, palms still tingling from where it had touched the stone. The pulse within the walls had quieted to a steady thrum, like a heart that had rediscovered rhythm after years of dormancy. Behind her, Lucien remained. He had not asked permission to stay. He had not needed to. You will explain, she said at last, her voice steady despite the current beneath it. He stepped forward from the shadows cast by the sweeping staircase. Candlelight traced the angles of his face, caught in the dark waves of his hair. His eyes no longer burned openly gold, but the color lingered beneath the surface, waiting. You felt it, he said. That is not explanation. It is foundation. Her temper sparked. Do not speak to me in riddles. A faint breath escaped him, not quite a sigh, not quite amusement. Very well. He moved toward the center of the foyer, stopping beneath the chandelier that had once trembled when he signed the contract. The crystals were still now, reflecting fractured light across marble. The Holloway bloodline, he began, was not granted this land. Ceres crossed her arms. It has been in my family for centuries. It was forged. The word slid into the air like iron striking stone. Forged by whom? She demanded. By wolf law. Silence thickened. She held his gaze without flinching. There is no such thing. There is. His voice did not rise. Did not need to. He gestured toward the staircase. Your portraits are not decoration. They are record. She did not turn to look at them. My ancestors were landowners. Your ancestors were queens. The word struck deeper this time. I saw the crown in the painting, she snapped. Artistic indulgence. No. The single syllable carried weight. The first Holloway, he continued, was not born to that name. She was chosen. A chill crept along Ceres's spine. Chosen by whom? By the Alpha King of that era. Something inside her recoiled, not at the idea of kings but at the implication. For what purpose? To bind. The pulse beneath the floor stirred faintly as if responding to the word. Ceres forced herself to remain still. You speak of binding as though it were sacred. It is. To chain a woman to a throne? To anchor a kingdom to the land. She stared at him. The Lycan throne, he said, his voice deepening slightly, is not merely rule over wolves. It is rule over the boundary. Boundary between what? Between what hunts and what survives. The words carried an old weight, something older than monarchy or land deeds. Ceres felt the hum inside her respond, not in fear but in recognition. You expect me to believe my family made some ancient bargain with wolves? Not wolves. His gaze sharpened. With kings. The air shifted again. Lucian took a step closer, not invading, not crowding, simply closing distance enough that his presence pressed against her senses. The Lycan bloodline, he continued, is not animal. It is sovereign. It predates the kingdoms carved by men. We do not exist in stories. We exist in law. And this law binds my blood? She demanded. It does. He laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. By what authority? By oath. Her laughter died quickly. What oath? The binding law. The words seemed to resonate faintly against the walls. When the first Alpha King claimed dominion over Blackmoor, Lucian said, he faced war on two fronts. Rival packs from the north sought to fracture his hold. Human lords from the south sought to eradicate what they could not control. Balance required anchor. And that anchor was a woman? She asked coldly. It was a bloodline. He did not look ashamed. Your ancestor, he continued, stood between two worlds. Human by birth. Sovereign by choice. She bound her blood to the Lycan throne, ensuring that no Alpha could rule without Holloway beside him. Ceres's heart thudded once hard. No Alpha could rule, without? A queen. The word no longer felt theatrical. It felt structural. You're describing political marriage, she said. That is hardly mystical. It was not marriage. His gaze held hers, unwavering. It was bond. The hum inside her surged faintly at the word. He swallowed. And what does that bond entail? It binds authority. Authority over what? Over us. The admission settled heavily between them. You are telling me, she said slowly, that the wolves outside obeyed me not because of you, but because of this supposed bond. They obeyed you because you carry the blood that legitimizes rule. The tremor beneath her ribs intensified slightly. That is impossible. Is it? Her mind flashed back to the moment she had spoken. Rise, and the entire pack had obeyed. To the rival wolf recoiling at her command. To the way the gate had responded to her presence even before Lucian touched it. I never asked for this, she whispered. No one asks for blood. She flinched at the raw truth in that statement. You signed the contract, he said quietly. I signed property transfer. You reactivated covenant. Her gaze snapped to his. Reactivated. The binding law does not dissolve with time. It sleeps. Until Holloway blood and Alpha blood stand upon the same ground and acknowledge claim. Her throat tightened. And by signing? You recognized my claim to the land. And that triggered. The law recognizing you. A shiver coursed through her. You manipulated me. I did not force your hand. You withheld truth. You would not have believed it. You are correct, she said fiercely. Yet you believe it now. The certainty in his voice infuriated her because it was not entirely wrong. The manner pulsed again, stronger this time as if reacting to the rising tension. Lucian turned slightly, glancing toward the staircase. There is more, he said. Of course there is. He began ascending without waiting for permission. For a moment she considered refusing to follow. Then the hum inside her shifted, pulling upward toward the second floor. As though something there waited. She cursed softly under her breath and followed. The corridor above felt different than it had that morning. The air carried a faint metallic scent, not unpleasant but charged. The portraits along the wall seemed almost luminous. Lucien stopped before a section of wall between two paintings. He placed his palm flat against the stone. Saris opened her mouth to protest. The wall moved. A low grinding sound echoed as a concealed seam revealed itself. Stone shifted inward, revealing a narrow passageway descending into darkness. Her pulse spiked. "You will tell me you did not know this existed," he said quietly. She stared at the opening. "I did not. Because it remained sealed." "By what?" "By lack of recognition." The hum inside her flared again, stronger, directional. She stepped past him before she could reconsider. The passageway descended steeply, lit faintly by torches that ignited one by one as she passed. He did not question how. At the base, the corridor opened into a circular chamber carved from stone. Her breath caught. The walls were etched with symbols, intricate carvings of wolves intertwined with human figures crowned in bone and silver. At the chamber's center stood a raised platform of dark granite. Upon it rested a crown. Not ornamental. Not delicate. Forged of silver and something darker. Bone woven through metal shaped like crescent arcs reminiscent of wolf fangs. She felt it before she consciously understood. The crown was not relic. It was waiting. Lucien descended behind her, stopping at the chamber's edge. "This is the seat of binding," he said. Her voice felt distant when she spoke. "Why show me this?" "Because denial will not survive sight." She approached the platform slowly. The carvings along the walls pulsed faintly in response to her movement. At the base of the granite platform, a final inscription stretched in a language she did not recognize, curved and angular at once. "What does it say?" she asked. Lucien stepped closer. "Blood binds throne. Throne binds land. Land binds blood." The words reverberated faintly in the chamber. "And if the blood refuses?" she asked. "Then the throne fractures." Her gaze lifted sharply. "What does that mean?" "The Lycan packs are not united by fear. They are united by law. Without Holloway beside the Alpha, rival claimants rise." She thought of the gray-furred wolf at the treeline. "They already are," she said. "Yes." Silence pressed in. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Do you require this bond for power?" He met her gaze evenly. "I require it for legitimacy." "And if I refuse?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Then the law will seek another path." "What path?" "War." The word echoed in the stone chamber. She closed her eyes briefly. "You are asking me to surrender my life. I am asking you to understand it." She opened her eyes again. "And what do I receive in this arrangement?" she demanded. He did not hesitate. "Crown." She laughed bitterly. "I have no desire to rule wolves." "You already do." The truth of that statement cut deeper than insult. "And if I choose to leave?" she pressed. "To abandon this estate entirely?" "The land would not release you." She felt that in her bones. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Would you release me?" His gaze held hers for a long, unguarded moment. No. The honesty in it stunned her more than threat would have. The hum inside her surged again, drawn toward the crown atop the granite. She took another step closer. The air thickened. "You should not touch it yet," Lucien said quietly. She paused. "Why?" "Because once you do, you will feel everything." Her fingers trembled slightly. "Feel what?" "The full weight of the binding law." She stared at the crown. At the bone woven through silver. At the ancient authority carved into its design. "You said the first Holloway chose," she said softly. "She did. And if I choose differently?" His silence answered more honestly than words. The chamber seemed to breathe with her. Above them, faintly, wolves howled again, not in chaos but in layered anticipation. The sound traveled through stone and into her blood. She did not reach for the crown. Not yet. But as she stood in the heart of Holloway Manor, beneath earth and law and centuries of waiting, she understood one terrible truth. The bond was not something being forced upon her. It was something waking within her. And it would not go back to sleep. Chapter 5. The forest began to die the morning she chose to deny it. It did not happen all at once. There was no thunderclap, no splitting of earth, no dramatic fracture in the sky. It began with silence. The wolves did not howl at dawn. Saris noticed it before she allowed herself to admit she was listening for them. She stood at the eastern balcony of Holloway Manor, arms folded tightly against the cold, and watched the tree lean. The fog that usually curled in silver ribbons across the moors lay unnaturally still, thin and brittle like gauze stretched too tight. The trees themselves seemed dulled, their deep green leached into a sickly gray. Behind her the manor was awake. Not stirring. Waiting. Lucien had remained within the estate through the night. He had not attempted to touch the crown again, nor to press her further about the binding law. He had given her space, not out of deference she suspected but out of certainty. As though he believed time itself would persuade her where he had not. He did not understand her. She would not be cornered by blood and prophecy. The decision had crystallized before dawn. She would reject the bond. Publicly. Deliberately. Before witnesses. If this law required recognition to function, then she would withdraw it. A knock sounded at her chamber door. She did not turn. Enter. Lucien stepped inside. Even without looking, she felt the shift in the air, the subtle tightening that accompanied his presence. The thread between them hummed faintly, a reminder she refused to examine too closely. You have decided, he said. It was not a question. Yes. The single word landed between them like a drawn blade. Silence followed, heavy but not surprised. You believe refusal will restore what was, he said at last. I believe refusal will restore what is mine. His gaze burned against her back. You misunderstand the law. And you misunderstand me. She turned then, meeting his eyes directly. I will not be bound to a throne I did not seek. You were born to it. Birth is not consent. The words rang sharper than she intended. For a moment something flickered across his face, not anger. Recognition. You intend to do this before witnesses, he said quietly. Yes. Why? Because if this bond requires acknowledgement to exist, then it can be denied the same way. It is not so simple. Then explain it more simply. He stepped closer. The binding law is not a contract that dissolves with declaration. It is balance. If you withdraw, the balance will not disappear. It will shift, she said. It will break. Her pulse quickened, but she held her ground. Then let it. A muscle in his jaw tightened. You do not understand the consequence. Then enlighten me. His voice lowered. If you reject the bond publicly, rival claimants will interpret it as weakness. The pacts that submitted will fracture. The forest that anchors this land will falter. She gestured toward the window. The forest is fine. Even as she said it, a leaf detached from the branch outside and drifted down, brittle and colorless. Lucien followed her gaze. It has already begun. He swallowed. This is manipulation. It is cause. She stepped past him toward the corridor. Gather whoever must witness it, she said. Your wolves. The villagers. Anyone who believes this madness. Ceres. The way he said her name, low, controlled, threaded with something deeper, nearly halted her. She did not let it. I am not your queen, she said without turning. And I will not become one. The courtyard filled by noon. Word traveled faster than wind in Blackmoor. Villagers gathered in uneasy clusters near the outer wall of the manor grounds, whispering among themselves. Some had come out of fear. Others out of curiosity. A few out of defiance. Beyond the iron gates, wolves lined the perimeter once more. Dozens of them, dark and immense, forming a silent ring. Lucien stood near the base of the steps, composed and unreadable. The scarred wolf that had first bowed to her remained at his right, watchful. Ceres descended slowly. She had chosen a dark dress, not ceremonial, not submissive. Her auburn hair fell loose around her shoulders, unadorned by crown or symbol. She carried nothing in her hands. She would not hold relic or law. She would hold only her voice. The murmuring dimmed as she reached the courtyard's center. She felt the land beneath her feet, not as distant hum now but as a restrained pulse. Waiting. Lucien did not look at her. He watched the gathered wolves. She faced the crowd. You believe, she began, her voice steady, that something ancient binds this land to the Lycan throne. A ripple of tension moved through the villagers. You believe I have been claimed. The word tasted bitter. The wolves did not move. Lucien's gaze shifted toward her at last. I stand before you now, she continued, to say that I reject it. The air stilled. Even the wind seemed to pause. I reject any bond forged without my consent. I reject any law that claims dominion over my blood. I reject the notion that my birth binds me to a throne. The pulse beneath her feet faltered. The wolf's ears twitched. Lucian's expression did not change, but something in his eyes darkened. I am Ceres Holloway, she said, lifting her chin. And I claim only myself. The silence that followed was not immediate chaos. It was worse. It was absence. The hum that had vibrated through the manor since the contract signing ceased abruptly. Gone. The ground beneath her feet cooled. A low sound emerged from the forest, not howl, not growl. Something deeper. Something wounded. The first leaf fell at her feet, not drifting gently but dropping straight down like ash. She did not look down. I do not accept this crown, she said louder now. I do not accept this bond. A crack split across the courtyard stone. Gasps erupted from the villagers. The wolves shifted uneasily. The scarred wolf lifted its head and released a long, aching howl. This time it was not chorus. It was lament. The trees beyond the gates shuddered as if struck by sudden frost. Green dulled to gray in spreading waves. Branches sagged under invisible weight. Lucian stepped forward. You have made your declaration, he said, voice tight. Enough. No, she snapped. You will hear me. His eyes flared gold. The law has heard you. The sky darkened. Clouds gathered with unnatural speed above Blackmoor, swirling inward toward the manor like ink drawn into water. The rival wolves emerged from the forest without hesitation. Dozens of them. More than before. Gray and bone-white in ash, their eyes cold and sharp. They did not hesitate at the boundary this time. They crossed it. The iron gates did not flare. They did not resist. They stood open and unresponsive, their carvings dark. The villagers began to retreat in panic. Lucian's pack surged forward, forming a defensive arc. Ceres felt it then, the absence. The thread between her and the land had snapped. The hum inside her chest had dulled to a hollow echo. Cold seeped into her veins. What have you done? She whispered, not to Lucian but to herself. You broke balance, he said. The rival alpha stepped forward from among the gray wolves, larger than the rest, fur streaked with silver scars. Its gaze locked onto her. Not challenge. Opportunity. The forest behind it continued to wither, leaves shriveling, bark splitting under unseen strain. Lucian moved to stand between her and the rival alpha. You see now, he said without looking back, why the bond is not ornament. The rival alpha released a sharp, triumphant howl. Its pack advanced. Lucian's wolves braced. The first clash erupted in a blur of fur and teeth. Ceres staggered backward as the courtyard descended into chaos. Wolves collided midair, snarls tearing through the air. Blood darkened stone. The villagers fled. She felt nothing. No pulse. No thread. No command. The scarred wolf lunged at a gray attacker, driving it back. Lucian shifted before her eyes. Not gradual, not monstrous, but seamless. One heartbeat human, the next a massive black wolf, eyes molten gold, jaws bared in lethal precision. The rival alpha met him head-on. Their collision shook the courtyard. Ceres pressed a hand to her chest. The emptiness inside her ached. This was what rejection had wrought. Not freedom. Vacuum. The manor behind her groaned, stone cracking, windows splintering as the pulse that had sustained it faltered. The forest's edge blackened further. Leaves fell in sheets. She had wanted autonomy. She had not foreseen collapse. Lucian and the rival alpha tore at one another in a violent blur. Blood streaked across dark fur. The pack fractured into brutal skirmishes. Ceres tried to call out. No sound came. The absence inside her pulsed painfully now, not dead but suppressed. Waiting. The rival alpha broke from Lucian's grasp and lunged toward her. Time slowed. She saw the hunger in its eyes, not for flesh. For throne. For legitimacy stripped by her rejection. Without the bond, Lucian's claim weakened. She had done this. Instinct surged. Not the hollow she had created. Something deeper. She stepped forward instead of back. No. The word tore from her throat. The rival alpha faltered mid-lunge. The sound carried farther than it should have. The emptiness inside her cracked. A flicker, faint but unmistakable, reignited beneath her ribs. The wolf hesitated. Lucian seized the opening, slamming into it with brutal force. The courtyard rang with the clash. Saris felt it then, the truth she had tried to deny. The bond was not a cage. It was conduit. Without it the land withered. Without it wolves fractured. Without it war claimed ground that balance had once held. She had rejected not domination, but responsibility. The rival alpha broke free again, retreating toward the treeline with a final snarl. Its pack followed, melting back into the dying forest. Lucian stood breathing heavily, blood streaking dark through his fur. The courtyard fell silent except for labored breaths and distant cracking branches. The villagers had vanished entirely. Only wolves remained. Lucian shifted back to human form without ceremony, chest rising and falling beneath torn fabric. He met her gaze. "You see," he said hoarsely. She looked past him toward the forest. Gray spread like rot. Leaves continued to fall. The hum beneath the manor did not return. She had severed it. And the land was bleeding for it. Saris swallowed hard. The weight of her declaration pressed down heavier than any crown. "I will not be claimed," she said softly. Lucian's expression hardened. "Then you will be conquered." The words were not threat. They were forecast. Above them thunder rolled. The forest groaned again. And in the distance rival howls rose, circling, waiting for weakness to widen. Saris stood in the center of a fractured courtyard, her rejection echoing through dying trees. Freedom had been the word she clung to. But freedom without balance felt dangerously close to ruin. And the forest was beginning to prove it. Chapter 6. The forest did not recover. By the third night after her rejection, the rot had spread beyond the manor grounds and into the deeper heart of Blackmoor. Leaves clung to branches in brittle silence before surrendering all at once in dry cascades. The river that wound through the eastern valley ran shallow and sluggish, its surface filmed with a strange metallic sheen. Birds no longer nested in the higher branches. Even the insects seemed to have retreated. And the wolves no longer held formation. Lucian's pack remained near the estate, but their vigilance had sharpened into tension. They paced the perimeter in restless circuits, ears twitching at distant sounds. The rival pack did not hide anymore. Their howls drifted through the evenings like deliberate signatures carved into the dark. They were circling. Saris stood once more in the underground chamber beneath the manor, staring at the crown upon its granite pedestal. She had not touched it since the day Lucian revealed it. The carvings along the chamber walls, once faintly luminous, now flickered weakly, as if sustained by an ember that threatened to go out entirely. "You feel it fading," Lucian said from the chamber entrance. She did not turn. "The forest. The law." She almost laughed. "You speak of it as though it breathes." "It does." She finally looked at him. He seemed different in the dim torchlight, not weaker but strained. The authority that clung to him remained, yet something beneath it had thinned. The gold in his eyes burned less steadily now, flaring only when anger or instinct pulled it forward. "My rejection did not end your reign," she said. "Your wolves still follow you. For now." The quiet certainty in that answer unsettled her more than open fear would have. "They scent fracture," he continued. "Rival alphas test boundaries when law weakens. They are already sending emissaries." "Emissaries," she echoed sharply. "Challenges." The word hung in the chamber like a blade. "You told me the rival alpha retreated." "He retreated because he was not yet prepared. And now? Now he believes you are unclaimed." Her spine stiffened. "I am." "No." The denial was immediate. "You declared yourself unbound," he said. "But the law does not interpret rejection as absence. It interprets it as vacancy." She stared at him. "In wolf law," he continued, "territory without bonded sovereign is contested. I am not territory. You are throne." The word struck hard. She stepped closer to the granite pedestal, placing her palm against its cool surface. The faint pulse within the stone trembled weakly beneath her touch. "And if I refuse to participate in this contest?" she demanded. Lucian descended the final steps into the chamber. "Then they will claim you as spoils." A cold silence swallowed the air. "You presume much," she said. "I know their kind. You are their kind." His gaze hardened. I am not theirs. The distinction mattered more than she wished to acknowledge. A distant howl rolled through the manor walls, low, resonant, layered with others answering from multiple directions. Saris felt it in her chest before she heard it clearly. It was not the mournful lament of previous nights. It was structured, deliberate, summoning. Lucien's jaw tightened. It begins, he said. She turned sharply. Begins what? The war call. The word itself seemed to shift the chamber's air pressure. Explain, she demanded. He moved toward the central sigil etched into the floor before the pedestal. A circular pattern of wolves intertwined with crescent shapes and human figures. When a rival alpha believes the reigning king has lost legitimacy, he said, he issues a war call. It is both challenge and declaration. To you. To the throne. Her pulse quickened. And how is it answered? With blood. The howl outside deepened, echoing off stone and valley alike. This time the answering cries were not limited to one direction. They rose from north and west and far beyond the eastern ridge. More than one rival pack. They have aligned, Lucien said grimly. You told me they were fractured. They were. He understood then. Her rejection had unified them. The forest groaned overhead as though reacting to the mounting tension. Saris stepped away from the pedestal. If they seek challenge you will meet it, she said. You are alpha. Without you I am contested. Then prove yourself. He looked at her with something dangerously close to frustration. It is not strength they question. It is law. She crossed her arms. Then this law is flawed. It is ancient. Ancient things break. And when they do, he replied evenly, they take kingdoms with them. Another howl cut through the air, closer now. The wolves outside responded instantly, shifting position. Claws scraped against stone above them. They approached the gates, Lucien said. Saris did not hesitate this time. She ascended the stairs with him at her side, emerging into the manor's foyer as the first impact struck the iron bars. The gates shuddered violently. A second impact followed, heavier. Through the open courtyard doors she saw them. Not dozens. Hundreds. Grey and ash-furred wolves crowded the treeline, their eyes burning with cold intent. At their forefront stood the rival alpha, larger than before, scarred muzzle lifted high. Lucien stepped forward into the courtyard without pause. His pack moved to flank him, forming a defensive crescent. Saris remained at the top of the steps. She felt the vacuum inside her chest where the bond's hum had once resonated. It was not entirely gone. Faint threads lingered like echoes beneath stone, but they did not respond to her as before. The rival alpha released a long, piercing howl. Silence followed. Then impossibly the wolf shifted. The transformation was violent and seamless. Bones cracking, fur receding, form elongating into something unmistakably human. A man stood where the wolf had been. Tall, broad, hair the color of winter ash falling past his shoulders. Scars marked his chest and arms like territorial maps. His eyes remained wolf gold. Gasps erupted from the villagers who had gathered once more at a distance. He stepped forward boldly, crossing the boundary that had once resisted him. This time the gate did not flare. It hung open, inert. Alpha of the faltering throne, the rival called, voice carrying with predatory ease. You stand challenged. Lucien did not shift. He remained in human form, shoulders squared. State your claim, he replied. The rival's gaze slid toward Saris at the top of the steps. My claim is vacancy, he said. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. The Holloway blood rejects you, the rival continued. The throne stands unbound. By wolf law, unclaimed territory may be seized. Saris felt heat flare in her cheeks. I am not territory, she called down sharply. The rival's eyes locked onto her. You declared yourself unbound. I declared myself sovereign. He smiled faintly. Sovereign without pack is prey. Lucien stepped forward. You tread near insolence. I tread upon opportunity, the rival corrected. His wolves fanned outward, forming a tightening ring around the manor grounds. Lucien's pack bristled, hackles raised. The air thickened with imminent violence. Saris descended the steps slowly, refusing to remain above the confrontation. When she reached Lucien's side, the rival alpha's expression sharpened. You stand beside him still, he observed. I stand for myself, she replied. And yet you do not wear the crown. The statement carried weight. Saris felt the absence of it like a physical mark. I wear no one's claim, she said. The rival inclined his head slightly. Then you are unclaimed. The word struck the assembled wolves like a spark. A low rumble spread through the crowd. Lucien's eyes burned brighter. Choose your next words carefully, he warned. I choose them precisely, the rival said calmly. By the binding law, a Holloway who rejects the reigning alpha opens the throne to contest. I answer that contest. He stepped forward another pace. I challenge your authority. The courtyard seemed to inhale. Saris's pulse thundered in her ears. And if he refuses, she demanded. The rival's gaze flicked to her again. Then he concedes. Lucien's voice cut through the tension. I do not refuse. The words landed like stone dropped into still water. You accept. Saris whispered. His gaze did not leave the rival. I answer the war call. A murmur surged through both packs. The rival smiled, slow and satisfied. Then by wolf law, he declared, we fight for throne and bond. Saris's breath caught. Bond, she echoed. If he falls, the rival said, eyes never leaving Lucien's, the Holloway blood binds to the victor. The world seemed to tilt. You presume too much, she said sharply. Law presumes nothing, he replied. It enforces. Lucien's jaw tightened. You will not touch her. If I win, the rival answered coolly, I will claim what law permits. The emptiness inside Saris flared into sharp panic. He turned to Lucien. You cannot accept this. I already have. You risk your life for a law I rejected? I risk it because without answer chaos reigns. And if you lose? She demanded. His gaze flicked to her briefly. I do not intend to. The rival stepped back, raising his voice. At moonrise, he called. In the ancient clearing. Blood for blood. Authority for authority. His pack answered with unified howls. Lucien's wolves responded in kind, though their tones carried edge rather than triumph. The rival's eyes returned to Saris one last time. You declared yourself unbound, he said softly. Now the world will decide who binds you. He shifted back into wolf form in a fluid snap of bone and sinew, then retreated with his pack into the forest's gray depths. The courtyard fell into strained silence. Saris turned slowly toward Lucien. You will not fight for me, she said. I fight for the throne. And the throne is tied to me. Yes. Her hands trembled despite her effort to still them. This is because of my rejection. This is because of fracture. She stepped closer. You said the bond legitimizes you. Then restore it. His eyes darkened. You declared before witnesses. I can declare again. Not without consequence. What consequence could be worse than this? He looked toward the dying Trilene. The law does not respond to panic. She followed his gaze. The forest sagged further under invisible weight. Branches cracked under their own brittleness. The rival's war call had not merely been challenge. It had been catalyst. What must be done? She asked quietly. He faced her fully then. Either I defeat him at moonrise, he said, or you stand before the clearing and claim the bond willingly. The words settled heavily. And if I do neither? Then war consumes what remains. Her throat tightened. The wolves around them shifted restlessly. Moonrise was hours away. Yet already the land seemed poised at edge of something irreversible. Saris looked toward the forest where the rival pack had vanished. She had wanted freedom. Now she stood at the center of a war sparked by its declaration. And the moon had not yet risen. Chapter 7. Moonrise loomed like a blade poised above the horizon. The hours between the war call and the appointed duel did not pass. They constricted. The forest seemed to draw inward, branches bowed and gray leaves shedding in silent surrender. Holloway Manor groaned intermittently, as though the stone itself strained beneath pressure too great to contain. Saris did not wait in her chamber. She descended once more into the underground chamber beneath the estate, alone this time. Lucien had retreated to the outer grounds with his pack, preparing in the way of wolves, silent, deliberate, instinctively aware of what approached. He had not tried to dissuade her from moving freely within the manor. He had not ordered her to remain hidden. He trusted her. Or perhaps he understood that no wall could shield her from what was coming. The concealed passage opened at her touch now. The torches ignited as she descended, though the flame flickered weakly, thinner than before as if starved of air. The chamber felt different. Not waiting. Strained. She approached the granite pedestal where the crown rested. The bone-woven silver seemed dimmer yet not lifeless. It pulsed faintly in rhythm with something deeper than the failing forest. You rejected us. The voice did not echo. It resonated. Ceres froze. The words had not come from behind her. Lycan was not present. They had come from the walls. From the stone. From the carvings etched into the chamber's circumference. She turned slowly. The human figures intertwined with wolves seemed almost to shift beneath torchlight. Their expressions no longer static. Their stances no longer ornamental. You rejected balance, the whisper continued, not singular now but layered. She stepped toward the carvings. I rejected coercion, she replied, though she did not know to whom she spoke. A flicker of light traveled along the etched symbols. You were never beneath. The words reverberated through her chest. The chamber shifted. Not physically, visually. The carvings along the walls began to glow brighter, expanding outward from stone into something more vivid, more dimensional. And suddenly she was not alone in the chamber. The walls dissolved into vision. She stood in the same circular space, but it was no longer buried beneath stone. The ceiling had vanished, replaced by open sky and full moon. The granite pedestal stood at the center, newly carved and unmarred by time. Before it stood a woman. Auburn hair fell in waves over strong shoulders. Her posture was upright, chin lifted not in submission but command. Wolves circled her, not threatening, not dominating. Guarding. A man stood opposite her, tall, dark-haired, eyes gold as wildfire. Not Lycan, but like him. The first Alpha King. The woman extended her hand. Not to be claimed. To claim. The Alpha knelt first. Ceres's breath caught. The wolves followed, lowering themselves in unison around the stone platform. The woman lifted the bone-woven crown and placed it upon her own head. The ground pulsed. The wolves howled. And the Alpha rose only when she gestured for him to do so. Not beneath. Beside. The vision shifted again. Another generation. Another Holloway woman. Another Alpha. Again the Alpha kneeling first. Again the Holloway claiming the crown. The pattern repeated across decades. Across centuries. The Holloways had not been brides given to wolves. They had been sovereign anchors. The binding law had never chained them. It had elevated them. The chamber snapped back into its present form. Ceres stood alone once more before the pedestal, breath unsteady. You were never prey, the layered voice murmured. She pressed her palm against the granite. I thought I was being forced. You were being summoned. The distinction shattered something inside her, not pride but misunderstanding. Her rejection had not been defiance of tyranny. It had been abandonment of authority. Lycan had never attempted to place the crown upon her head. He had waited. Because the law did not function without her will. It had always required her choice. Her ancestors had not been silent. They had commanded. The wolves had not bowed because Lycan stood behind her. They had bowed because her blood remembered. Above ground, a distant howl rolled through the forest, sharp and taunting. The rival Alpha preparing for battle. Ceres lifted her hand from the pedestal. What happens if I do nothing? She asked quietly. Then blood spills without anchor. And if Lycan falls? The chamber seemed to tighten. The victor claims throne. And me. Law will bind. Her jaw set. She stepped closer to the crown. If I accept, she whispered, it must be because I choose it. The torches flared brighter. Then choose. She did not reach for the crown yet. Not until she stood fully certain of what she claimed. She ascended from the chamber with steadier steps. Outside the sky had darkened fully. The moon hung swollen and pale above Blackmoor. And in the ancient clearing beyond the dying treeline, wolves gathered in widening circles. The war call awaited answer. But now, she understood the truth. And it changed everything. Chapter 8. The ancient clearing lay at the heart of Blackmoor, a ring of stone markers older than any recorded map, their surfaces carved with the same symbols etched beneath Holloway Manor. By the time Ceres reached its edge, the packs had assembled. Lucian stood at the center of the clearing in human form, stripped of coat and armor, scars mapping his torso in pale silver lines. His posture was calm, not relaxed but controlled. Across from him stood the rival Alpha. The air thrummed with violence held barely in check. Ceres remained beyond the inner circle. She had not yet touched the crown. The law had not yet been restored. The rival Alpha's gaze flicked toward her briefly. "Still unclaimed," he said, voice carrying easily across the clearing. Lucian did not respond. He shifted first. Bone cracked and reshaped in fluid violence. Black fur rippled across his skin. His wolf form towered larger than any in the surrounding packs, shoulders broad, eyes blazing molten gold. The rival shifted in answer, gray and scarred, equally massive. The first collision sounded like thunder. They met midair, teeth bared, claws tearing. The impact drove them both into the stone-lined earth, sending dust spiraling outward. The gathered wolves did not interfere. This was alpha combat. Lucian drove forward with brutal precision, jaws snapping toward the rival's throat. The rival twisted, raking claws across Lucian's flank. Blood darkened black fur. Ceres's nails dug into her palms. She felt no hum. No command. Only fear. The wolves circled tighter. The rival Alpha lunged again, sinking teeth into Lucian's shoulder. A sharp snarl tore from Lucian's chest as he twisted violently, slamming his opponent into a stone marker. Cracks splintered along ancient carvings. The clearing shook. The forest beyond groaned. The rival broke free and lunged toward Lucian's throat again, faster this time, fueled by desperation and opportunity. Lucian met him head-on. They collided again. And again. Each clash more violent. Each wound deeper. Ceres felt the absence of power like a scream trapped beneath her ribs. Lucian fell. The rival would claim law. And her. The thought ignited something feral within her. Lucian staggered. The rival seized the opening, slamming him into the earth and pinning him with crushing force. Teeth closed around Lucian's throat. The clearing fell silent. Ceres moved before thought. She stepped into the ring. Gasps rippled outward. The rival's gaze flicked upward as she approached. Lucian's eyes met hers, gold dimming under blood and strain. This was the moment. Not of coercion. Of choice. Ceres turned away from the clearing. She ran. Through dying trees. Through brittle leaves. Back toward Holloway Manor. The wolves did not pursue her. They sensed what she intended. She descended into the chamber without hesitation. The torches flared as if expecting her. The crown pulsed brighter than before. She approached it without trembling now. "You will not bind me," she whispered to the empty chamber. "I will bind you." She lifted the crown. It was heavier than it appeared, cold bone and silver pressing into her palms. The moment she placed it upon her head, the world ignited. Power surged through her veins like wildfire. The hum returned tenfold, roaring through her body and into the earth itself. The chamber walls flared brilliant gold. The carvings pulsed in radiant light. Above ground the iron gates blazed. The forest inhaled sharply. She felt every wolf. Every heartbeat. Every breath. Lucian's faltering pulse. The rival's triumphant snarl. She ascended from the chamber like a storm breaking free. By the time she reached the clearing again, the ground trembled beneath her. The rival Alpha still pinned Lucian. But when Ceres stepped into the ring, the earth answered. A shock wave rippled outward from her feet. The rival was thrown backward as if struck by invisible force. Lucian collapsed to his side, blood dark against fur. Every wolf in the clearing dropped to their knees. Even the rival. Ceres stood at the center, crown gleaming beneath moonlight. Her voice did not rise. Did not need to. Enough. The word reverberated like thunder across Blackmoor. The rival attempted to rise. She lifted her hand. He froze mid-motion, body trembling beneath unseen pressure. "You answered war call," she said calmly. "Now answer queen." Silence pressed in. The rival bowed his head. The forest inhaled fully for the first time in days. Leaves ceased falling. The river's distant murmur strengthened. Lucian shifted back into human form, blood streaking his skin as he struggled upright. He did not kneel. He watched her. Sarah stepped toward him. The bond flared between them, not forced, not imposed. Chosen. She extended her hand. This time, he knelt. Not in defeat. In recognition. The wolves followed. And the forest began to heal. Chapter 9. Dawn rose differently over Blackmoor. The gray pallor that had seeped into leaves and bark receded as though drawn back by unseen tide. Green returned slowly at first, faint veins of color threading through brittle branches. Then with steady strength. The river swelled against its banks, carrying away the metallic film that had dulled its surface. Holloway Manor no longer groaned. It stood upright and watchful, not strained but alive. Sarah stood upon the courtyard steps with the crown resting firmly upon her head. It no longer felt foreign. Its weight aligned with her posture, balanced, deliberate. Lucian stood beside her. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside. The gathered packs filled the grounds once more, though their formation had shifted. There was no longer a fracture between black and gray. The rival alpha stepped forward from among his wolves. He knelt without prompting. "I submit," he said evenly. "To throne and queen." Sarah studied him carefully. Submission did not erase ambition. But it acknowledged law. "You challenged for vacancy," she said. "Vacancy no longer exists." He inclined his head further. The forest pulsed faintly in affirmation. Sarah turned her gaze across the assembled wolves. "You will not war for throne again," she said. "Not while I stand." The words were not threat. They were structure. The wolves lowered themselves fully to the ground. Lucian's hand brushed hers lightly, a question unspoken. She laced her fingers with his. Not because she must. Because she chose. The bond flared warm and steady between them. Not consuming. Anchoring. The forest breathed. The law settled. Blackmoor was not chained to throne. It was rooted to it. Sarah Holloway had rejected a crown she believed would cage her. Now she wore it knowing it expanded her. She had feared surrender. She had mistaken it for loss. But this was sovereignty chosen. The wolves rose at her subtle gesture. The rival returned to his place within the unified pack. Lucian leaned closer, voice low. "You have secured peace." "For now," she replied. He studied her profile beneath morning light. "You could have walked away." "I tried." "And now?" She glanced toward the forest's restored canopy. "How I stand." He smiled faintly. Not triumphant. Respectful. The iron gates gleamed in sunlight, carvings vibrant and alive. Sarah descended the steps and crossed the courtyard slowly. The wolves parted around her without fear, without hesitation. They did not kneel this time. They walked with her. Balance had been restored. Not through coercion. Not through conquest. But through choice. And as the sun rose fully above Blackmoor, the forest did not bow in submission. It bowed in recognition. Its queen had claimed it. And this time, he claimed it back. Thank you for listening to this story. Please like, share, comment where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories every day. Thank you and God bless you.